welcome to AGK'S Vinyl Life. I'm your host, Anthony K. And today is New Year's Eve, 2021. So that means that on this week's episode, I'm going to be counting down my top 21 new studio albums of 2021. So I always wait until New Year's Eve to count down my favorite albums of the year, because that's kind of how I grew up when I was a teenager and listened to AM radio. My local AM radio station, Chum AM, used to count down their top 100 songs. They'd play them and count them down from 100 to number one. It would start early in the evening on New Year's Eve and go right through till New Year's Day by the time they played and counted down the entire 100 songs. And then when I got a little older and started listening to FM radio, my favorite FM radio station, Q107, would play their top 20 albums of the year on New Year's Eve. And they would start early in the evening on New Year's Eve and go into the wee hours of the morning, and they would play their top 20 albums of the year entirely. The entire album, they would play them back to back, the entire albums. So I'm kind of following that formula because that's how I remember it. So just as I did last year, I'm going to do the same thing this year. And if you didn't see my video from last year, if you're new to the channel, I did a top 25 of 2020 countdown on New Year's Eve last year. I will leave a link to that video at on the outro of this video. On screen on the outro, you'll be able to click on a link there and go visit my video from 1 year ago, where I counted on the top 25 albums of 2020. So let's get on with it. I have two big stacks of records here. This stack over here is my top 21 of 21, and this stack here are honorable mentions and special mentions. So now the 10, these are what I'm going to call these are the honorable mentions right here. This is my honorable mentions pile, and there are 10 albums here. These are my 10 honorable mentions of 2021. There's nothing wrong with these albums. It was a really agonizing list this year. Last year I found it a lot easier to come up with my top 25 list. This year I literally spent the previous night agonizing and writing notes. And I had pages and pages of notes that I was writing. I agonized over this list. I actually had to pull albums out and spin them a little bit, spin a song or two, or needle drop across the album to just refresh my memory and sort of really help me sort of get these in some sort of order. It was a really, really tough list for me to make this year. But after quite a few hours of agonizing and writing notes and thinking and playing and sampling, I came up with it. And 3 albums that didn't make my final selections were all albums that did very, very well worldwide this year. They had huge vinyl sales. They had huge streaming numbers. They topped charts all over the world. And the reason I eliminated them was solely on how much did I spend those albums this year. That was how I had to finally just say which ones did I spend the most, which ones didn't. And these 3 didn't quite make it. And they were Billie Eilish's Happier Than Ever, the Kid Leroy's Fuck Love, and last but not least, St. Vincent's Daddy's Home album. Fantastic albums, but it just didn't get spun that much by me. But here's the 10 honorable mentions. These are the 10 honorable mentions. I highly recommend all of these albums. They are fantastic spins beginning to end. Certainly any of them could have made my top 21, but it was an agonizing decision as to which ones I was going to chop off. But these are definitely worthy pickups. Absolutely all great spins beginning to end. And they are Canadian rocker Lee Aaron and her brand new Radio On album. Fantastic hard rock, female-fronted hard rock. Lee Aaron is a Canadian legend. She back in the 80s had a famous metal album called Metal Queen. Fabulous album. Lee Aaron, Radio On, brand new studio album from her. Ashniko, little hip hop. This is hip hop, rap, dance pop. It's a mix of all sorts of stuff. And Ashniko's Demi Devil, another great spin beginning to end, something really different and fun. Blackpink and their debut K-pop band, Blackpink, the 4 ladies, and their debut album simply called The Album. Blackpink's The Album, released on CD in the fall of 2020 and released on vinyl in February of this year. Blackpink and The Album, a fantastic album. Pop, hip-hop, pop, rap, done K-pop style. Fantastic spin. And the next album could have easily made my top 21 albums of the year. And there's only a couple reasons why I put it in the honorable mentions pile. I showed it in my last Vinyl Finds video a couple weeks ago. So it's a fairly new album. It only dropped in November and I haven't had a chance to spin it a whole lot. It could have made the top 21, but I eliminated it for two reasons. One is because it's a covers album, and I try to keep my top 21 albums to be all new studio material, new songs written, new songs. And this one is a album of famous old songs covered by a band. And I'm, of course, talking about Deep Purple's Turning to Crime album that dropped in mid-November. So the only reason I put this in an honorable mention is because it's a covers album, and because I really haven't had a time to spin it that much yet. It hasn't had a lot of spinning because it only dropped in the middle of November. Deep Purple's Turning to Crime, and I didn't show you this last time. It's on a clear vinyl. It's a 45 RPM pressing on clear vinyl. So a great spin, but honorable mention to Deep Purple's Turning to Crime. The next album up here, also honorable mention, I also showed this recently, is Marta Gabrielle, and this kind of followed the same reasoning as the last album, mainly because it's a covers album. Metal Queen by Marta Gabrielle, a fabulous spin. Marta Gabrielle, a European metal guitarist and singer. A great spin, includes a cover of Lee Aaron's Metal Queen on here. A fabulous spin, and I highly recommend this album, Metal Queens by Marta Gabrielle. Honorable mention to her. The next honorable mention goes to this album right here. It's another covers album, this time done by Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga, and it's called Love for Sale. That's right, the fall release by Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga. Some great vocal jazz, Love for Sale. These two just collaborate so well. Love for Sale. This is an Urban Outfitters exclusive on yellow vinyl. I don't think I've ever shown this one before in any videos, so that's why I'm giving you a peek of it now. Really great spin for some great crooner jazz. Lady Gaga, Tony Bennett, Love for Sale. Honorable mention for that one. The next honorable mention is an album that came out in May. It's pop. It's some great female pop. It's Zara Larsson's Poster Girl, her latest album, Zara Larsson, Poster Girl, with the big singles Ruin My Life, Wow, and Talk About Love featuring Young Thug. It's a great spin. Zara Larsson, Poster Girl. The next one here is the debut album from Wolfgang Van Halen's band, Mammoth, WVH. Some great straight up hard rock. Wolfgang Van Halen and his band Mammoth, WVH, and their self-titled debut album. Honorable mention for him. And the next honorable mention is yet another covers album, and it is Starship, Greatest Hits Relaunched, which I talked about in great detail in a previous video only a few weeks ago. Starship, Greatest Hits Relaunched, where they re-recorded all their best tracks, and this is a fantastic spin. Starship, Greatest Hits Relaunched. Honorable mention to that. So last up in the honorable mentions, or what I call 10 more great spins of 2021, is Styx and Crash of the Crown, their latest studio effort, and I believe this dropped around June of 2021. So there you go. There's 10 great additional spins for 2021. So let's do it. Let's get on with the top 21 of 2021. But before I do that, let's get the promotional stuff out of the way. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Thumbs up always make people feel good. And if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please subscribe to my channel and turn that notification bell on so you don't miss any of my videos. I normally post a video once a week. And comments welcome down below. I always reply to every comment. Sometimes it takes me a little bit of time, but I always reply to every comment, as comments are the best way to make a channel better, in my opinion. And last but not least, if you're not following me on Instagram, follow my Instagram, which is at AGK_Lifetime of Vinyl, where I post my spin of the day every day, among other things. And I'll even do a special shout out to my gaming channel. I stream games over on Twitch TV, Twitch, of course, being another social media platform. I stream games on Twitch, mostly from my PlayStation 5. So if you're a gamer and want to watch some great gameplay action, check me out on Twitch. And my Twitch name over there, my Twitch channel is Thunderball7. So check that out as well. So here we go. These are my top 21 new studio albums of 2021, counted down in order from 21 to 1. And I'm really happy with the final results of this list. Like I said, I agonized over making this list, but I'm really happy with the final outcome because there's equal quantities of the genres of music I listen to the most, being metal, rock, and pop. And I think I'm pretty much equal 777 in those categories. So it's a good mix here. I'm happy with that. A really equal mix of all those three styles, which are the three styles of music I listen to the most in life. And let's do it. Coming in at number 21 from symphonic band EPICA, their latest studio album that dropped in February of this year, and it is Omega, symphonic metal band EPICA, and their Omega album, a double LP. Fantastic spin. If you love symphonic metal, this is definitely one of the best of the year. EPICA's Omega album. Next up is some pop. And this is a fairly new album. It might have ranked a little higher on my chart if I'd had a chance to digest it longer. This album only came out at the beginning of November, and I didn't receive my copy until almost the end of November. But it did come in, and the only reason it did place low is because it is a great spin. It's a fun spin, but there was a little bit too many ballady songs on here for me, and there was one Christmas song that kind of threw the album off for me. But it is Abba's Voyage album. That's right, Abba, and their brand new first album in 40 years. Abba's Voyage album, I think 39 or 40 years. Abba Voyage, a great spin, in at number 20 in my top albums of the year. Coming in at number 19 is an album by a young man who's a good friend of mine. He's a multi-instrumentalist, and he featured last year. His album from last year placed in my top 25 of last year, and he's once again made it into the top 21 albums this year for me. He's a really talented musician. He deserves to be bigger than he is. It's a shame that he's not out there in the world more, and I hope people watching this video really check him out because he deserves much more fame and fortune than I think he's gotten. And he works very hard, day in and day out, producing music with a multiple number of bands and projects, and he just pumps out music like crazy, and he's very, very talented. So please check him out. But in at number 19 this year, Project Gemini, and in the year 3073, Book 2. I love this album. It's a great spin from him. Sacred Sons is just a fantastic spin. It really is. Just check out Sacred Sons. If that doesn't convince you to buy the album, I don't know what will. But really check out Project Gemini, in at number 19 for 2021, within the year 3073, Book 2. And he is an independent artist. So support independent artists, please. Coming in at number 18 was an album that dropped not too long ago. It might have placed a little higher if I'd had a chance to digest it more, but I'm happy with where I finally placed it. I'm really happy with where I've placed everything. It's a great spin. These guys are back. Another band that hasn't made music for a while. It's been a few years since their last album, but I think this is probably the best album I've heard by these guys 20 years, in my opinion. At least 20 years, in my opinion, maybe more. And they are Duran Duran and Futures Past. This is old school Duran Duran. This harkens me back to the days of, their debut album and, Rio. This is just a great, great spin. Duran Duran and Future Past. Check it out. Highly recommend it. Great spin. And it came in at number 18 this year for me. Next up in at number 17 is an album by a band that they're not really a symphonic metal band, and they're not really a progressive metal band, and they're not really a prog band. They are kind of a combination of all three. I hear Genesis in here, but then I hear symphonic metal in here. I hear Iron Maiden in here. I hear all styles in here. but they are absolutely incredible. This is the first album I've ever gotten by this artist, and maybe one day I'll check out some of their earlier works. But this is Transatlantic and the Absolute Universe Forevermore, and this is the extended version. It is a 3 LP edition. It comes with 3 LPs and 2 CDs. What a fantastic conceptual, it's a conception album. The Absolute Universe, fantastic prog. It's more prog rock than anything, but I highly, highly recommend it. And it scored, it was higher in my chart at the beginning of the year, but this came out early in the year, very early in the year, and it ranked much higher on my chart. But of course, newer releases over the course of the year pushed it down the charts a little bit. But coming in at number 17, Transatlantic and the Absolute Universe. Really great stuff. In at number 16 is an album that also placed higher on the chart earlier this year, but got pushed down a little by subsequent releases that came out after it. But still fantastic. This is another symphonic metal album, debut album by this band, and I love this album. It really is good. It was tough to put it at 16 because I could have ranked it higher. I really could have ranked this one higher, but I had to go with what I went with, and I put it in at 16. But I mean, anything in the top 21 is a big winner. I mean, if you make the top 21 on my list, that means these albums are a fantastic spin, beginning to end. So this one came in at number 16, and it is the group HEARTHEALER and the Metal Opera by Magnus Carlsson, and Magnus Carlsson being the main instrumentalist of this album. He is a multi-instrumentalist, just like Mark Anthony Kaye of Project Gemini. Magnus Carlsson, a multi-instrumentalist, but he has brought in 8 incredible singers to play the parts on this album from famous symphonic metal bands from all across Europe, and it is a fantastic spin. The Metal Opera by HEARTHEALER. An absolutely incredible spin. In at number 16. Next up, in at number 15 this year, is an album that has done very well. It's very popular, very well-known album by a band that unfortunately gets a lot of hate and shade in the vinyl community by older vinyl community members, which is really a shame. They are a young band, and it's young bands like these guys that are the future of rock music, that's going to keep rock music alive going forward. And a lot of people hate on these guys, older people. I'm going to be straight up. Older vinyl community members hate on them because they think they're a ripoff of Led Zeppelin, and nobody is allowed to sound like Led Zeppelin. Well, I say poo on you. These guys are fantastic. This album is brilliant, beautifully recorded. The vinyl is mastered gorgeously. It is Greta Van Fleet and the Battle at Garden's Gate. This is a fantastic spin. People, open your minds and actually sit down and listen to this album, and you will be surprised. Listen to it with an open mind. Stop being jaded and give these young bands a chance. The Battle at Garden's Gate by Greta Van Fleet is a fantastic spin, and it came in at number 15 for me this year. Next up at number 14 is an album by an alternative rock band that I showed very recently, and it is fantastic. And these guys are one of my favorite alternative rock bands of all time, and they are Angels and Airwaves, and this is their fantastic new album, Lifeforms, which I showed in a video, in one of my Vinyl Finds videos from December, on an incredible colored vinyl. So just check out that video if you want to know more about this album. This is a fantastic spin. In at number 14 this year, Angels and Airwaves, Lifeforms. Next up at number 13 is an album I haven't shown on my channel before. And this came out in August of this year from an Australian artist. She's from Australia. She's a singer-songwriter from Australia. I have her first album. This is her second album, and this has climbed its way up the charts for me. It is just an absolutely wonderful, wonderful singer-songwriter album in the tradition of artists like Taylor Swift, if I was to pull somebody from the top of my head. It is a really wonderful album. Really, really. Check it out, people. She's Amy Shark. This is her second album, Cry Forever. A really spectacular spin. I highly, highly recommend it. And she came in at number 13 on my top 21 albums of 2021. In at number 12 is an album I've talked about a couple of times before. I did an entire video on this album, so check that out on my channel. I think I dropped this in October, beginning of October. I dropped a video about this album on my channel. It's pop punk, it's pop metal, it's death metal. She's fantastic. This album really surprised me how really great it was, and it hooked me. There are songs that just absolutely hooked me on this album, and it could have even placed higher on my list, but I finally decided to put it in at number 12, and it is Living Dead Girl and Exorcism. Check them out. Another independent artist from Canada, an independent artist. Check them out, Living Dead Girl. Look them up online, livingdeadgirl.com. A fantastic spin. I highly recommend this. It's death metal, it's pop metal, it's pop punk, it's everything. She is incredible. Molly Rennick, who fronts the band, is an incredible singer. Living Dead Girl and Exorcism in at number 12. Coming in at number 11 is an album by a Spanish artist, actually. She sings in both Spanish and English on this album. She is incredible. It is sultry, it is sexy, it's pop mixed with hip hop, mixed with lounge music. There's Amy Winehouse in it. She is incredible. This is a real surprise. This album really surprised me this year and really grew on me. Look for big things coming from this girl. She is going to blow up. She is absolutely somebody to keep your eye on. This album I cannot recommend higher. It is a fantastic spin, and it is Kali Uchis and Sin Miedo coming in at number 11 on my top 21 of 21. Check it out. It is a fantastic spin. Like I said, some of it's sung in Spanish, some English, but you don't need to speak the language to enjoy the music. It is an absolutely incredible spin. Sin Miedo by Kali Uchis. Check it out in at number 11 in 2021. And here we go. These are the top 10 albums of 2021. And in at number 10 is an album by a legendary artist that I really don't have very much of. I have a Greatest Hits album by him, and I have Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. He's never been big for me. You know, Greatest Hits is all I really needed by this artist. But I really love this album that he released this year. It is an album of collaborations. It is a 2 LP. It is called The Lockdown Sessions, and we're talking about Elton John, and I showed this not too long ago. It is all collaborations. There's a few covers on here, and there's a lot of original songs here, and it is fantastic. I never thought I would put an Elton John album in my top 10 albums of the year anytime, because I haven't been a big Elton John fan really in my life, other than all his big hits. I love all his big hits, but never really was into any of his albums other than Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. But this one surprisingly made it in to my top 10 of the year. The Lockdown Sessions, Elton John, in at number 10. In at number 9, an album I talked about just a couple of videos ago. These guys, my discovery of 2021, hands down. I got all 3 of their albums that they've released so far here in 2021. The first 2 albums were reissued before releasing their brand new album about a month or so ago. And these guys are fantastic. This album takes me back to Phil Spector's Wall of Sound 60s era groups like the Ronettes and the Crystals, and it's got some garage rock thrown in. These guys are smoking hot. This album is fantastic. I would have even possibly ranked it higher, but I'm settling quite happily on number 9 with the Corettes and Back in Mono. Check it out. If you like Phil Spector, Wall of Sound, if you like the Ronettes, if you like 60s girl groups, and so on and so forth, and you like garage rock, pick this up. It is in mono, and the album's called The Fabulous Corettes, Back in Mono on Damaged Goods Records. Look it up, check them out. These guys are fantastic. In at number 9 for 2021. In at number 8 is an album by a very famous young lady who's been burning up the charts in the 2010s. She's one of the most popular artists in the world right now. This is her latest effort. This album actually came out on CD in November of 2020, but the vinyl version didn't drop until May of this year. And she is Ariana Grande, and her latest effort, Positions. It is a fantastic spin. She is an incredible R&B artist. This is a very sexy, steamy R&B masterpiece. Love this album. I don't care what anybody says. Ariana is great. I've seen her live in person, in concert, and she can sing. Incredible singer and one of the great talents of the 2010s. Ariana Grande positions in at number 8 on my top 21 of 2021. In at number 7 is another album by a young lady, and this album is kind of the future nostalgia of 2021 in my opinion. She's a brand new artist. This is her debut album, and I love this thing. This is another great album of dance pop and pop. It is absolutely spectacular, and she is Ava Max, and her Heaven and Hell album. Every song is an absolute killer on here. If you like dance pop and pop, check this out. Ava Max, Heaven and Hell, a really, really great spin. My favorite pop diva, pop, dance pop album of the year, hands down for sure. And she came in at number 7, so she did very well in my chart this year. Pop diva, Ava Max, fantastic album, Heaven and Hell. In at number 6 is an album by another famous band. These guys have been around for about 20 years now. I love these guys. I think they're one of my favorite. They're probably my favorite band of the 2000s, and they are Coldplay, and it is their brand new album, Music of the Spheres. In at number 6 for this year for me, Music of the Spheres, their latest effort. I love this thing. It's just a feel-good album, a wonderful spin, and nice to see them back on the top of the charts. Their last album, Everyday Life, placed fairly well on my chart last year. I think it was around number 10 or so. But Music of the Spheres, this is a great spin, and I just love this album, and I highly recommend them. I know there's a lot of people in the vinyl community that aren't big Coldplay fans, but me, I love Coldplay. Like I said, one of my favorite bands from the 2000s on. Music of the Spheres, in at number 6 on my top 21 of 21. And next up in number 5 is an album that I wasn't sure where to place it. It was that Coldplay and this one were kind of jostling for position, but I ended up giving this one the number 5 spot, mainly for the musicianship and for the amount of content. Though both these albums are fantastic, there's something about this album that I really love, and this is actually a covers album. And I know I talked earlier about, putting the covers albums as honorable mentions, but this is a covers album where the band is covering their own music, but it's not so much covers as a reimagining of the music. And they are my favorite prog rock band of all time, hands down. And I talked about them in my last video about reissues. I showed a whole whack of their albums that have been reissued, and they are Saga, Canadian prog rock band Saga. This is their latest album from March of this year called Symmetry, and it is a fantastic album. It's a double LP, lots of music, and it is Symmetry by Saga, and it is what they call an acoustic album, and that's why I let this one make it into my top 21, and it placed very high because they've reimagined some of their most famous songs, and they didn't pick their hit songs. They picked deep cuts, album tracks, deep tracks. They picked deep cuts and they reimagined them, replacing all the original instruments that they normally would play, of all sorts of keyboards and electric guitars and so on, and replaced those instruments with violins and banjos and sitars and guitars and string instruments, and the effect is amazing. It's just a wonderful album. The musicianship is fantastic. It came in at number 5 for me. Number 5 for my top 21 albums of 21 is absolutely hands down Saga and Symmetry. Check it out, people. Do yourself a favor. This is a gorgeous album. In at number 5, Symmetry by Saga. Coming in at number 4 for this year, an album from one of my favorite artists of all time. He's in my top 5 artists of all time. People know me, know my channel, know who I'm talking about. And it is Alice Cooper and his album from earlier this year, from February, Detroit Stories. finishing off the year at number 4. I love this album. A lot of people kind of knock Alice. They say, oh, Alice hasn't got it anymore. He's still got it, people. He's still fantastic. This is one of his best albums in years and years and years. A lot of people kind of, some people bash the album because it's like, well, this isn't the usual Alice with the graveyards and the ghouls and the ghosts and the creepy stuff. No, this is just Detroit hard rock. That's why it's called Detroit Stories. It's Detroit hard rock and garage rock. It's fantastic. There's a couple cover songs on here. There's a lot of original material on here. It is a fantastic spin. Detroit Stories, Alice Cooper, number 4 on my top 21 albums of 2021. And here they are, my top 3 albums of 2021. And coming in at 3rd place is an album I showed in one of my Vinyl Finds videos from December that had just come in late November, and this immediately catapulted its way up my list. The first time I spun it, it blew me away. I've been spinning it like crazy the last couple of weeks. I absolutely love this album. I knew I was going to love this album before I even opened it. I talked about this band that I loved their first 2 albums, and I wasn't wrong on their 3rd album. I think this 3rd album is their best work yet. They are somewhere between symphonic metal, metal, and hair metal. I'd say they're just more straight up speed metal, metal, and pop metal or hair metal. They are fantastic. I highly recommend this album. Definitely number 3 for all of 2021. Catapulted up the chart. Beast in Black, Dark Connection. Check these guys out. I had not shown you the inside of this album because when I showed it in my Vinyl Finds video, it was still sealed. Dark Connection by Beast in Black. A fantastic spin. And this was one of a limited edition of only 200 that came on a purple silver ink spot vinyl. The value of this album has skyrocketed. I did not know I was getting a limited edition of only 200 pressings in this variation. And when I paid for it, I paid the usual like $40 plus shipping. And this album is worth close to $300 now, according to Discogs. But this is a fantastic album. Highly recommend it. Beast in Black. Dark Connection, metal at its finest, hair metal, pop metal, speed metal at its finest, and it's kind of a concept album. The guys that were inspired, I don't know if you take a good look at the center gatefold there, the guys were inspired by an anime, a 90s anime, one of my favorite animes of all time, inspired this album, so maybe that's why I appreciated it so much more, because I appreciate the artwork here and the styling and the songs, and if you see the music videos, it's based on a very famous anime, and this is one of my laser discs from that series from way back, Armitage the Third. This is an anime from the mid-90s, Armitage the Third. That's just one of the episodes on the Laserdisc, just because of a nice big cover so I can show you guys. Armitage the Third, a fantastic anime, and that's what inspired this album. So check it out. In hands down, number 3 for this year for me, Beast in Black, Dark Connection. And now at number 2 and number 1, man, this was a brutal decision. In fact, I've never struggled so hard in my entire life trying to pick a best album of the year, and it's kind of a tie. It really is kind of a tie. I put both of these albums at number 1 and both of these albums at number 2. It's kind of a tie for first place between these albums, but for the sake of this video and to actually give them a ranking, I'm going to do it on basically the amount I've played each album. And that is the only reason. As far as I'm concerned, these albums are both number 1 for 2021 for me. Both of them are number 1. But based on amount of I played each one, they'll be ranked accordingly. So in second place, strictly because of the amount I played it, and this is only because this album came out in September, so whereas the other album came out in March. So obviously I've played the other album a lot more this year, and it has been continued to be played all year long. But this one came out in September. It is Iron Maiden Senjutsu, a spectacular album. This album is probably the best album Iron Maiden has made in the last 20 years. I love this album. The more I play it, the more it grows on me. I absolutely love it. It is a fantastic spin. Iron Maiden Senjutsu in at number 2 in my top 21 of 21, and literally only because I've played Senjutsu so many times, and the other one I've played more times. But, you know, come to me a year from now, And I have a feeling a Senjutsu will probably end up, in the long run, this one will probably get played more than the other one, but who knows? But I give this a number 1 anyhow. This is a number 1 for me, but for the sake of this video, I'm putting it at number 2 just based on how much I played it in the course of the year. Iron Maiden, Senjutsu. And in at number 1, an album that came out in March that blew me away. This is a landmark album for this band, and it's been played constantly all year long. Just as last year I played Dua Lipa's Future Nostalgia all year long, I've played this album all year long. So in actuality, I played it a little bit more than the Iron Maiden, but I think in the long run these two will get equal play. That's why I said this could be number 2 or number 1, just like the Iron Maiden. But for the sake of this video and for choosing a winner, it was a tough choice between Iron Maiden and this one. Believe me, a very tough choice. And it's strictly down to how many times I've played each of these albums. And because this one's been out since March, obviously it's been played more. It is the Pretty Reckless, fronted by Taylor Momsen, and their Death by Rock and Roll album. The t-shirt should have given you guys a clue. Death by Rock and Roll by Taylor Momsen. I'd show you the inside cover, but it's... Man, let's see what I can do here. There's the inside cover. Death by Rock and Roll, Taylor Momsen. This album is hands down best rock album of the year. This is hard rock at its finest. This year's winner. Last year, my top albums on my top 5, 3 of them were dance pop albums. So last year's charts were dominated in the top 5 by pop. This year's top 5, all in the rock category, hard rock and metal. And this one is just a fantastic rock album. Brilliantly written songs, fantastic musicianship and guitar work and musicianship. And Taylor Momsen's vocals on this are spectacular. This is just a winner beginning to end. Death by Rock and Roll. Only Love Can Save Me Now. What a killer guitar solo in that song. And So It Went. Big single. 25. My gosh, watch the music video for 25. My Bones. Got So High. Broomsticks. Witches Burn. Stand Still. Standing at the Wall. Turning Gold. Rock and Roll Heaven, which was definitely a tribute to Chris Cornell, who was a big influence on Taylor Momsen. And Harley Darling, a great closing song. Death by Rock and Roll. I got to give it to these guys for best album of 2021 for me, hands down. But like I said, a very, very close tie. In the end, I think ultimately it's a tie between Iron Maiden's Senjutsu and Death by Rock and Roll. Both, in my opinion, are number 1 on my charts. But for the sake of the video and to give it a decisive spot, we're gonna give Pretty Reckless's Death by Rock and Roll the number 1 position. And there you go. Those are my top 21 albums of 2021. Let's see what happens in 2022. Though I don't think it's going to be a big year for new releases, mainly because of the vinyl delays. And I've seen the lists for what's coming out from January to the end of March, and there's only 3 new releases that I'm interested in. So I have a feeling that the pickings could be slim by this time next year for my top 20 albums of top 22 of 22, because so far I only see 3 new releases I'm interested in the first 3 months of 2022. The vinyl, and this of course is on vinyl, the vinyl delays are really going to affect us hard in 2022 for new artists, new albums, new material. We're really going to be seeing that crunch caused by people like Adele's record company ordering 500,000 copies. There's a lot of vinyl and a lot of new artists that are waiting to have their albums pressed and released. So we'll see what comes out in 2022. I'll see you all in a year for another top 21 albums, and next year it'll probably be top 22. But I hope you all enjoyed this, and Happy New Year's, everybody. Happy holidays. Have a safe, happy New Year. See you in 2022. And as I always say, rock and roll!